Public Space Travel is a leftist, anti-capitalist podcast of disgruntled academics, video gamers, and friends. Our belief is that knowledge should be made more accessible and be used for anti-oppression and non-hierarchical revolutionary ends. You can support what we do at patreon.com/public space travel and reach out to us at publicspacetravel@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 208-502-1406. Now, on to the show.
Hey everybody, all right, welcome to another edition of Weekly Warp. This is the August 9th edition. We have a full house here today. We have Lazarus.
Hello.
And Hunty.
Hey.
And Lichen.
Hi.
As well as shadow producer Marks.
Hi.
And a very, very special guest with us. We have Kane Koanoa with us today. Say hello to everybody at home.
Aloha.
If you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief background of a little bit of who you are, what you're comfortable sharing, where you're coming from, especially in regards to the topic that we're talking about today.
Okay. Based on my name, I'm from Hawaii. I'm Hawaiian, as well as a mix of other things. I have my father of many children. Maybe I won't give the number, but I have many kids. Let's see.
Father of many children.
Father of many children.
More than two, fewer than 10.
Kane Koanoa, father of many children.
Father of many children.
I am in a education program. I am focused on Native stories, specifically on how the stories we tell ourselves and the stories that society tells us really dictate how we view our world and how we view our fellow human beings. And so my kind of interest in the topics that we're talking about is all around the stories. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for introducing yourself.
Yeah, I know. We're like, don't y'all know him? This is Kane Koanoa. Like, what? You haven't heard? Damn.
I will say his storytelling skills are very, impressive. I think you're a very good storyteller.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I just love to talk, that's all. When you get
Mark of a true storyteller.
But in a way that, people enjoy. You're also good at listening.
Okay, so
that's the part Luci's
I really love that. I love that name, Father of Many Children.
And starting us off, Lazarus has a couple of things he wants to say. So why don't you take it away, Lazarus?
Before we get into the topic this week, which is education, as it's been played out a lot in the news, we got a quick announcement. There's going to be no weekly warp next week. This is because we're going to take a much-needed break to play, and yes, record for all of you, the next installment of our RPG role-playing game series, Long Live the Myriad Federation. Hello friends, summer vacay is almost over and it's time for back-to-school shopping to commence. For our students this fall, we have an assortment of number 2 pencils, child-size hazmat suits, and hydroxychloroquine tablets.
Started taking it because I think it's good. I've heard a lot of good stories. And if it's not good, I'll tell you right. I'm not going to get hurt by it, get hurt by it, get hurt by it, get hurt by it, get hurt by it.
Warning, hydroxychloroquine has not been determined by the FDA to be safe or effective for treating or preventing COVID-19 and could potentially cause injury or death. So, we're going to break it down today into 3 areas regarding education. First one is we're going to have a little discussion about reopening. While some public schools and universities have accepted that there is indeed a pandemic and that any percentage of people dying is far too fucking many, some have instead chosen to have students return to in-person education. A public school in Manatee County, Florida, had a positive case on their first day. Meanwhile, North Paulding High School in Georgia tried to cover up a photo taken by a student showing no social distancing in a densely packed hallway of non-mask students. They suspended the student and then they unsuspended them, and then publicly stated that the picture was taken out of context. Students are only in the hallways briefly and that, quote, wearing a mask is a personal choice and there is no practical way to enforce a mandate to wear them, unquote. Even Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer said on the 7th that, quote, if we don't open up schools, you're going to hurt the economy significantly, end quote. So with the coming semester, we have this situation where COVID is presenting a very real threat to those who are going back to school, not just to the students and the teachers, the educators, but also the families that they're going to have to go back to. However, it seems like what's really matters here in society is it's about that bottom line. It's about getting them back to school and so forth. What do y'all think about this? Open this up to everybody.
I mean, one thing that goes through my head just in general with this decision or topic is, again, like my dismay that people have such trouble, in my opinion, holding space for like complexity and contradictions. Like it can simultaneously be very difficult and in many ways very inequitable to not begin schools and to ask working parents to figure out what to do with their children, to help people like maintain a livable income that many do not have. Like there are these very, very real problems that exist simultaneously with the risk for children's and adults' lives. And so it's hard for me to see people talk about one or the other as if they're opposing forces and can't both exist. Like, in my opinion, I don't think that it's worth the risk to knowingly put people in a place where there will be cases and potentially deaths. That doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge all the problems around that. So I don't have solutions, but I do think that it's really troubling to hear people talk about it as if the economy is more important than all of that.
Yeah, I think I would agree that the way that people are framing it is the part that's really scary, because you do put this idea of the economy on the shoulders of children then at the end of the day. I mean, if you take away all of the other bullshit that people are spouting about the economy, which is in complete ruin at this point. Like, people going back to school at this point isn't going to fix the problem. It just isn't. There's no way to do that because cases keep increasing, because people keep getting sick, because we have over 160,000 deaths, because there aren't jobs to return to. So by putting the burden of the economy on the shoulders of children and then children's parents, because they're the ones who will have to bear the brunt of whether children are in a school environment or not, is just unfair. I mean, that's so small a word to encapsulate the complexity, like you were saying, of this problem. So fucked up, I guess, maybe is better.
Generally so, yeah. Right. It's actually, I was just thinking as you guys were describing all that, I mean, this is when businesses reopen, we saw like those photos of people in those, the glass separators between them and the cashier, or just from other tables. And it's just kind of like that should be an indication in and of itself that this is not safe to do. And then there's that photo now of the teacher's desk that has that same like plexiglass shield in front of the desk in the classroom. Like, that's ridiculous. So dumb.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to, this might be another topic for later, but just what is this doing to kids developmentally? And again, the pandemic is real. Like, we can't wish for it to go away because it's inconvenient and painful and yada, yada, yada. But I think of just the experiences of a 5-year-old, let's say, going to kindergarten for their first year of school, and what they're learning is like, be afraid of people, don't let people touch you, don't touch people, always be on your guard. Like, all the things that exactly the opposite of what we want to teach kids to some extent. But just,
No, that's not to some extent. That is on the curriculum standards.
Like, trust people, trust people to some extent.
Interpersonal communication, treating people like kindly,
share,
like nice,
don't let them touch your stuff.
Positive touch, right?
It's really scary to think, like, I mean, I know a lot of young children, like, vaguely, but to think of that reality when you don't have the social skills and experiences to know otherwise, that is your normal. And again, that's not something that we can take away. And I think that going to school is not giving them a social experience like normal. Anyone who says that, that's not what it is, and it can't be. So we're asked to weigh these things that are terrible. Like, we're asked to weigh intimacy with safety and social connection with public health. Like, it's fucked up is kind of what I keep circling back to too. Yeah.
Next question.
I know.
Lazarus. No, I'm just playing.
I'm wondering too, like, what kind of bullying is it? What way bullying has evolved now? And like, I mean, because there's that student who documented how people weren't wearing masks, the other students weren't wearing masks, and I wonder like how the bullying is looking like. 'Cause it's probably not visible. It's probably like online, I assume.
There's probably like a designated ball boy now. Like, now there's only one ball boy and so everybody knows. Like, everybody's calling that one kid ball boy because really just the ball boy can pick up the balls.
No one else can touch the balls.
No one else. I mean, there's like two people playing, let's say, I don't know, maybe tennis. And then, like, there's just the one ball boy who has to like run around.
And once the ball's been touched, like, you have to get a new one, I would assume.
Or the ball boy is in the disinfector. Which
the ball boy is in the disinfectant?
I feel like our listeners are like, what the fuck y'all talking about right now?
Like, just
this is some postmodern like metaphor here, okay?
Postmodern metaphor.
This is some 200 IQ stuff.
Leave it in.
I also have I wanted to add a story, actually, that might add to what we're talking about. So this summer, my daughter, I have a 5-year-old daughter, or actually she just made 6 yesterday. It was her birthday.
Happy birthday.
And she has been diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum. And so they had us a special summer class for students like herself. And so my wife and I, after great debate about whether or not to send her, after hearing what they were, planning on how to keep them safe, and that it was going to be a very small group, we decided to try to send her just because she was, she really enjoys the social. And so we were hoping that she might get an opportunity. And so we did it. And maybe 2 weeks later, I'm dropping her off at the school, and the principal comes walking out and tells me, just to let you know, one of the students' father is connected to a man who just got COVID, who just was diagnosed with COVID. So the principal told us, just want to let you know, you don't have to be here. You can go home. It's up to you. There are some parents who still bring in their kids, and we're just going to have them play outside. We're going to take them outside. We're not taking them into the building. And so, but what's interesting to me is that he informed my wife when he talked to her later on the phone that the health department, he called the health department immediately when the family called him and asked them for guidance on what they should do, what he should do. And they actually told him that if the family whose child was going to the school hadn't tested positive, then he shouldn't tell anybody else. He shouldn't tell the other families. And for him, in his own mind, he didn't think that was right. He didn't think that was correct. And so he took it upon himself to tell everyone that was bringing their child over, which for me made me think more about like how important it is to be able to trust the leadership in the schools, the principals, that if they don't have your child's best interests, or if they're dealing with, like the health department said this, so I'm just going to follow what the health department tells me. There's a lot of, I think, issues that will pop up because of that, because the health department may be seeing it again more of an economic situation, right? If we don't have to work everybody, then we don't have to.
I wonder, this sort of goes back to what Luci said before I derailed our conversation with talk of ball boys, but I wonder if part of this is also like that. I mean, the health department might be coming from a very HIPAA-oriented sort of space, because not only might you see bullying in terms of like school districts suspending students, like what Lazarus was talking about in terms of like from Georgia, the kid is suspended for taking a picture and posting it. Not only might you see something like that, but then what happens to families who have COVID or have a family member who has COVID? Like what kind of stigma does that automatically institute? And there are laws regarding what you can tell people about who is sick and with what and under what circumstances. So, I mean, while it might be that the health department in this town was very much like, don't tell anybody, their economic ramifications, it could have also been, this is not, you actually can't tell people in a class of 5, then you know who the family, you know what I mean, or something like that. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what happened. Like, it could be nefarious. On the other hand, like, what happens to families who do send their kids to school when they have COVID? I mean, what if they don't have any other choice? Or, right. I mean, they're just like Lichen was saying, there's so many layers of complexity to this that are just, I think about, and I'm not trying to equate the two, but I'm thinking about HIV and the ways in which people were treated as a component of having something like that. It's not the same for myriad reasons. We can talk about, you know, violence against LGBTQ folks, all those sorts of things. But think about how those people were treated. I mean, there's so much wrong. And again, on the shoulders of children.
Right.
It's not funny.
And even like the stigma of wearing a mask. Like, I lost my shit when I heard about, I think it was a bus driver in Western Washington who was killed because he asked people to wear a mask, and they killed him. Like, I don't know what to do about that. It's like people will put this violence onto you if you wear a mask, if you don't wear a mask, if you have coronavirus. Yeah. So the bullying, I mean, in the microcosm of school, I can see it going in a lot of different directions. But I think that's a good point that, yeah, like, they're trying to weigh these things maybe, and we don't always know what they're weighing. But
I think it was in France.
Was it in France?
Yeah.
Oh.
I Google checked
okay,
you.
Well,
so because I remember the story and I was like,
yeah.
What?
Maybe it was just someone beat there. I mean, there have been multiple, like, you know, people being beaten up. Like,
yep.
It's, yeah. But yeah, thanks for sharing that though. The story about your daughter, because
yeah,
that's
and
real.
since then we haven't taken her back to school. We just are too nervous now, and she is one of those, you know, quote unquote populations that could get it bad if she did catch it.
Yeah.
So we're really, yeah. I mean, that population in general, right? Because it wasn't just people with who had autism on the spectrum. You had people with Down syndrome there. So there's a lot of possible health issues that could really make it devastating for that population if they were to catch COVID.
Should we move on to the next topic? The strikes, the responses, the pushback.
Oh, we got the neoliberal privatization.
Yeah.
Are we talking about Betsy
actually,
Totally
one other
shocked
thing,
them.
I just to keep it in perspective, some stuff in perspective. Currently, right now, as of today, or as of yesterday, I guess, and according to Robert Reich specifically, but like over $1 billion in tax cuts have been given to big corporations, and over the last 4 years, over $2 billion have been given to the military. And at this time, the GOP is claiming that we can't afford to help people during the pandemic. So just for the context of why is this all happening? Does it have to happen? I don't know. Does it? Look at the numbers. Anyway, moving on.
No, I think that's good to mention. I think it's also, I mean, this isn't, and we can edit this as I'm sure, well, and by we, I mean Marks. But
Hi, Marks. You're probably listening to us in the future.
Sorry.
I think it's really important, because this is the Weekly Warp, to mention that in that whole, like, they don't have money to help, those executive orders signed by Trump yesterday are dangerous precedent for our democracy. So while I do think that we need some sort of, the United States needs some sort, and by we, I am not including Trump or any of the GOP senators. Those guys are all bags of dicks. And some women, there are also bags of dicks.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Kathy McMorris Rogers, flipping you off. You can't see me, but that's what I'm doing.
It's very aggressive.
Fucking, what was I talking about in the first place? Oh, yeah. It's dangerous precedent. So to sign the power of the purse, the power to do these sorts of things and administer funds anywhere do not belong with the president. And they don't belong with the president for the safety and security of our democracy. Now, we already knew that the safety and security of our democracy was under hella attack, but him signing in executive orders this idea that he's going to administer funds to states, first of all, obviously, yes, there's money. So you fucking liars. Like, billions of dollars here, there, and everywhere, sure. But he doesn't have the right to do that, and we shouldn't stand for it. It's dangerous. I just needed to say that. We can put that wherever you want, but I'm worried.
Yeah.
But there is money. It's just we have to get it the right way, and that means that Mitch McConnell needs to not be in charge of the Senate.
And I think it's, again, this what people believe when the government presents its statements as the bottom line, like this is how it is, neoliberalism, there is no alternative, Margaret Thatcher, like that closes people off from even realizing like money is also, I mean, it's a material reality, it's also a construction, like where is it being created? So I think that
that's right, it's gotta be backed by gold. Sorry.
Yeah.
I love that Lichen just dropped Margaret Thatcher. I love that she was like,
such a nerd.
Look it up, bitches. Don't you know?
Don't you know? That's
Google
like
it,
the
you
only...
plebs.
Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, that's what I thought in my head.
That just reminds me that Austin Powers, right? Austin Powers, think of Margaret Thatcher on a cold day. Think of Margaret Thatcher on a cold day.
Yes,
Wow.
I actually had that same connection.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I did.
Can we put that audio clip in there? Can we do that? Yeah.
Okay. I will like say things that I don't know what I should know and what a person who's not weirdly immersed in academia knows. So anyway, that's where I come from.
No, I thought it was funny. It was like, neoliberalism.
Margaret Thatcher,
I'm
bitches.
Like, yeah. Dropping knowledge hard.
I made the connection in my brain, and then I was like, that movie really did not age well, so I didn't want to mention it.
I don't even know that.
It did not. It really didn't.
But yeah, just when we accept things as, it's almost like parents. Like we have wow, I got excited for a second. We have a professor who likes to use the example of like a very disciplinarian parent being like, because I said so, and just like shutting it down, and any rebuttalment is just like thrown out the window. Like, you're doing it because I say so, don't ask questions, this is what it is, I have authority, I have expertise, shut up and go do whatever you're supposed to. And I think when we talk about the budget, sometimes that's how it's presented. So anyway, I agree with Hunty, and I am terrified of what this is doing as a precedent.
I don't know why, but I just had a thought of like, does that kind of going what you just said? Does that mean like Margaret Thatcher was like kind of like a dominatrix, like having like dominatrix logic?
But without the pleasure. Like there was no pleasure from the person she's talking to.
Okay. Yeah, good clarification. Okay. No
Without the
shame.
pleasure. I think people pay extra for that.
Yeah, and under neoliberalism.
Yeah, I don't think that was something people. Well. Okay.
Margaret Thatcher without the pleasure.
No, Margaret Thatcher is without the pleasure. She was she is not a dominatrix because there is no pleasure.
I still think Margaret Thatcher without the pleasure could be a t-shirt.
Cite it and then be like a misquote by Lichen.
Misquote by Lichen.
Well, on that Margaret Thatcher. Oh, no, let's go to the next part here about neoliberal privatization.
Yes.
A recent Truth Out article titled COVID-19 Microschools are Betsy DeVos's latest privatization scheme by Candice Burned, sorry if I mispronounced that, discusses the neoliberal solution to education during COVID, which is privatized, quote, microschools. These microschools consist of pods of students with personalized pedagogies by families or teachers. It's a blend of homeschooling and privatized education approaches. This comes as Education Secretary Betsy DeVos had advocated for the School Choice Now Act, which is $5 billion in tax credits for families opting for homeschooling or private school, and the federal threat to withhold federal funds from any school that does not open its classrooms fully in the fall. A combination of right-wing neoliberal and libertarian groups have their economic tendrils in this, including Charles Koch, the Walden Family Foundation, the Heritage Foundation, and the Reason Foundation. The goals here are pretty clear. It's basically neoliberalism, like by the textbook, right? It's gutting public services, especially during times of crisis, for privatized solutions. In this case, it's the divestment of federal funds and instead towards businesses via this privatized education alternative for those interested in like the neoliberalism and basically its modus operandi. You can check out Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine book, which really goes further down into that. I think one of the main concerns here is that this not only reveals but intensifies the inequity, specifically for communities of color and so forth. That if you don't have the money, you're really not going to have equal, if not greater, quality of education. You're not going to be able to, I guess you could say, buy your way into like these micro schools, these pods or whatnot. And with public education being more, or I should say less and less funded, it's going to pose really long-lasting problems for these communities.
The thing that, so it's the neoliberal part of this that's really, we're going to return to fucked up. So, because, so there's this idea, like there's this free market idea about these sorts of schools, right? And this whole like free market economy is really leveraged and built on the false premise that everyone has equal opportunity, which they simply do not. And so that's sort of like the crux, at the very base of it, that's the crux of neoliberalism. Like there's no way for all of these things to be equitable, equal, let alone equitable, right? And so the problem at its core is that with a free market ideology and this idea of tax cuts for families who, you know, are sending their kids, if you're mentioning a tax cut already, you're talking about a bracket that most of American families don't live in. So, I mean, most humans actually don't usually live in those tax brackets, right? And so, first of all, there's no equality. Second of all, we don't live in a world where that's possible. Third, the free market is false. Like there's no such thing as that. And we're like living through changes in American businesses to the fact that, you know, 5 people have made trillions of dollars off of a global pandemic. Again, complexity, layers, all these things. In addition to that, wouldn't it be lovely if people could be in these cooperative learning environments where you do have small groups of students, where equitability is possible, but it's not coming from the system where someone's trying to upend publicly accessible education? Fuck. Because part of what you describe, Lazarus, is lovely. Yeah. Like, wouldn't that be great? To have the problem is that it doesn't function that way. And like you said, people don't have access to that. They just simply do not. We don't live in an environment or a country where that sort of cooperative sense has been, obviously, look at mask wearing, right? Like we for whatever reason don't feel like we can rely or should rely on one another.
Yeah. And just to clarify, like historically not having like the access to resources is going to prevent you. And when you work in that, like you said, that neoliberal like framework where like, oh, but everybody has access to whatever. It's like, no, like who predominantly has most of the resources? It's going to be like the top people, and it's typically going to be like white, cis, hetero, you know, so forth, like straight men. Well, redundant, but you know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, you're totally right. To go back to that point, though, that cooperative learning, like, it's interesting because I think what we're doing is we actually are seeing a shift from this, like, public, institutionalized, mandatory education where you come to a classroom to learn and then you leave, and instead you have, like, these home, community, like, learnings, but they have these privatized, neoliberal, you know, when we're saying that we mean capitalist interests at play here. Exactly. For whom and for what ends? Because
the curriculum is still fucking written by Pearson. Like, the places that people are getting the things to teach their kids, you know, it's not homeschooling like, this is how you make a garden and let me show you, and also let me take you to a protest and show you how democracy functions or doesn't. You know, it's not those things. It's a curriculum to teach you how to pass the SAT or get a good score and then get into a college. So, like, the whole entire system is rigged against some and for others.
Right.
I can't not move my hands. Don't tease. What are you doing?
I'm doing it too. I'm like, yeah, it is fun.
And it really confuses me in so many senses. I feel like so much of my time, like as a critical person in education, is spent questioning and pushing against these corporatized, like huge class sizes, standardized curriculum, not teaching about social justice, like all of these things that I have problems with. And then to hear the very people I'm critiquing sometimes be like, no, you're right, that's terrible. Like collaborative small class community learning is awesome. And it's like they know it. They know that what we're doing is fucked up, but they're only going to let that be a thing for a certain group of people. But then we have this like huge pool of false beliefs that all of the shitty stuff is okay, to be like, oh, well, the rest of you will still get this because that's okay too. So it's this weird thing. It's like people aren't stupid. We realize what good things are sometimes. Not that that's always clear or linear, but like it's this really weird, we know it. Like sometimes I think I don't have to convince people that more collaborative learning would be good. They know it. It's just
the thing,
what
and
they'll do
DeVos,
to keep it away from people.
Yeah, but DeVos is saying, do micro schools when you can. So we're speaking to white, middle class and higher humans.
Right.
And then she says, or send your fucking kids back to school or we're not going to give you money.
Right, and she's
Like
never
that-
even been
like,
to a
this
public
is-
school. Like she doesn't know shit about anything.
I think this is like a trend that we see in like the conservative party and the right wing, is that it's really like they have a goal, they have an agenda set, and they're not interested in facts really. Like they're the ones who say like, you know, facts don't care about your feelings, but they're the ones that specifically bend the facts to support their feelings,
Right.
and their feelings are aligned with like, you know, their agenda for, you know, all the fucked up shit that we've already discussed so many times, but just
Solidifying power in the hands of
right.
rich white Americans.
Yeah, it's so there are arguments for either this or that, and their quote unquote plan for children is not about the children. It's about how do I support this, you know, my boss basically, that kind of thing.
And the twisting of facts, I think that's a really important thing too, because like fact cannot be divorced from ethics. And I feel like so much of what the US and neoliberalism and in general just do is try to sever those ethics from the fact. And it terrifies me, like with Trump, like this post-truth era. What scares me isn't the idea of there being multiple truths in coexistence. The idea is that whatever benefits people with privilege at the moment becomes fact. And that flip-flops, as we see, so fast. And the fact that Trump can go from anti-mask to the like hardcore, and the next day wear a mask and say that he's the most benevolent human who's ever walked the planet, or whatever he said, and that people do not blink an eye, that his supporters are like, yeah, we're still with you. I do not understand that perversity of being willing to flip-flop based on privilege. Like, I don't know if I'm articulating that, but
no,
yeah.
I think that's a really smart way to look at that. Actually, flip-flopping based on privilege is, I think, a really, really good way to sort of articulate what that looks like. I think about when you talk about that, the CDC page on returning to school too, because I've seen a lot of people say, if we're going to listen to the CDC, then we have to listen to the CDC all the time. The CDC, after we took away the data set for them and hospitals stopped reporting straight to the CDC, and under, you know, the Trump administration leadership, posted that whole thing about how being in school is good for kids because they're going to miss out on all. But what is truth without ethics? Like you said, I mean, that's a perfect example of that, is to look at, yes, what the CDC said is true. Like, it is better for kids to be able to socialize and to be outside of their homes and to experience things, for the most part, for most children. And also, is this ethically right?
yeah.
Fucking no. We're back to fucked up.
That should just be the title of this episode. It's all fucked up. Education.
I don't know. I really like Margaret Thatcher, but without the pleasure.
But okay, I must
Neoliberal
reiterate.
schooling, Margaret Thatcher without the pleasure.
And just to like circle back to that misquote, I do not associate Margaret Thatcher with pleasure. That's kind of my point.
Oh, that's also funny.
That's sort of my main platform.
That's sort of like my main thing is just like, don't think I associate Margaret Thatcher with pleasure. That's all you need to know about me.
How about a show title? It's Margaret Thatcher all the way down.
Oh.
Whoa. Whoa.
All right.
Okay, Lucy.
I'm sorry.
What'd you say, Koanoa?
I say that sounds like a Showtime special.
Yeah.
Particular
Late
kind of
night
show.
one.
Late night Showtime.
It's all in quotes, the crown. Margaret Thatcher all the way down.
From like Turtles all the way down, but Margaret Thatcher instead.
Dominatrix? Question mark.
Oh. This whip was made by a private corporation, not union made. Okay.
Not union man. Okay. I realized I jumped ahead before when I said, "Oh, let's talk about strikes and responses," but I skipped over the section we just covered. But
That means
strikes
you
and
did it.
responses. Oh, that means I read it. Okay, fine. I'm gonna read it in my best Lazarus voice. No, I'm just kidding. I won't do anything.
Okay.
The response by teachers and students nationwide has largely been against forcing in-person schools and its privatization. According to a Truth Out article titled "Teachers and Students Mobilize in More Than 35 Cities to Demand Safe Schools" by Ella Fassler, on August 3rd, thousands of teachers, students, parents, educators, and community members across at least 36 U.S. cities mobilized for a national day of resistance for safe schools. The Chicago Teachers Union, in coalition with over a dozen Black and Brown-led grassroots organizations, participated in and live-streamed a car caravan and rally downtown and in front of City Hall. Demonstrators honked their cars, showed off signs with slogans like "Grades, not graves," and gave speeches. Jennifer Johnson, chief officer of the CTU, tells Truth Out that the movement is calling for the safe and equitable reopening of schools remotely, investing in our schools and our communities, and police free schools. Since the economy can't reopen until schools reopen, teachers hold leverage beyond the educational realm. Teachers have the power, according to Eric Blank, author of Red State Revolt, The Teachers' Strike Wave, and Working Class Politics, to push not only for keeping parents and students and teachers safe, but potentially, if they are organized enough, to push the government and to finally take the measures necessary to actually flatten the curve and keep people economically sound until that happens. PST has reached out to the Chicago Teachers Union for a request to do an interview. We are still waiting for the response, but we will keep you updated.
So I'm really glad that there is a pushback by educators, teachers, students, families.
Yeah.
I still think it's a false flag, though. I still think the economy opening only when children return to schools is bullshit.
I agree. It's putting it, like you said, it's putting it all on kids' shoulders. Like, no, does anyone think that's what'll happen? Is
businesses didn't shutter because children weren't in school.
Right. And all summer,
So if that's not how that happened in the first place, why is it then the responsibility of children going back to schools? Like, the economy shuttered because COVID is running roughshod over all humans.
Right.
I think what was earlier, Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer had made that comment saying that if we don't open up schools, you're going to hurt the economy significantly. I believe that the justification that he gave was that students, children not going back to school, like parents aren't going to be able to stay home. They have to go to school. They have to, they can't watch their kids. And I think that was the inference that was being made there. But I agree, what seems to be coming from this conversation is this theme of we're pushing a lot of nothing. A lot of bullshit on the shoulders of children going back to school.
I have a theory that they're sort of like gambling with the optics of just seeing kids back in school will make people think
normal.
like that everything's fine. Like that they're like trying to just gamble on the fact that if you just see kids go into school, that will make you feel like you can also go to work.
Yeah.
But you already see that that's backfiring, right? Because people are getting sick, like immediately when
Day
school
one.
ends.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's gonna, I mean, it is a gamble they're making, which is definitely a losing bet. But I think that's why, and going back to the idea of stories, the power of stories, because you already see Trump trying to portray the idea that, oh, children don't really get sick, or it's not that bad, or it's not, because that's he's already jumping in front of that to create the narrative that we can go back to school, and that it's the Democrats stopping us because they want me to lose the election, right? Instead of being like, the Democrats don't want it to happen, or other people don't want it to happen because, not because they hate Trump, but because they love their kids and they don't want their kids to get sick. They don't want the risk. They don't want teachers to get sick. And those are all, it's a battle of narrative, right? And so that's kind of I think the struggle of everything we're talking about is the Republican Party specifically has their own media empire, right? In regards to Fox News, in regards to their other outlets, that 40% that trust Trump and they will like bow to his every word, keep eating off of that information. It's like they not only absorb the message, but they're willing to sacrifice their own lives, because a lot of that group is an older group. It's it's the elderly who most times are listening to Trump, and they're putting themselves at risk. Knowingly, not even knowingly, but I would say kind of because they're soaking in the misinformation, and they trust in him, right? Not only him, but maybe the religious leaders. So you got to bring in the religious ideas of, the right-wing faction of the Christian right group, and how a lot of those pastors aren't countering those messages, right? They're actually kind of lock in step with Trump. And so now you have not only the government, but you have the religious as well, all in one, saying that this message is true. And so that's kind of why Trump is so dangerous, right? Is because the people are so hooked into his story because of all these other entities that have lockstep with him, specifically religion, to prompt him up as this great leader, when in reality, as we know, he's really just a puppet for all these neoliberal organizations and right-wing groups who want more power. And so,
I think this idea of sacrifice too, like you talk about, what did you say? You said a battle of narratives? Because I think that's so much of what it is when we hear all of these very emotional stories, like ethos, pathos, logos, like the emotional pull. And this, I mean, we've been seeing, of course, for months that essential workers, specifically lower class people, specifically Black people, brown people, Indigenous people, are seen as expendable. And now the narrative that children are expendable because they, quote unquote, don't get sick. Like, I don't know where we draw the line. And we should always be drawing it when we are talking about human beings being expendable. But that idea, and I think, like, again, the gross contradiction of when I hear about like economic collapse, part of me just keeps thinking, why are we trying to fix capitalism? But when people are so damaged, like, people will get hurt as capitalism, quote unquote, collapses with economic turmoil. So how do we get rid of capitalism or transform to something better without...
Capitalism has never been what people think it is. The free market has never been what people think it is. Capitalism, this idea of, again, equality, let alone equity in terms of access to capital, is a myth. And it has always been a myth. It's more of that storytelling that Kane Koanoa just mentioned. I mean, it's a narrative that has been built about what kind of access you have to resources and how we're going to allocate those resources. It has never been true that capitalism works. So I don't know that there is a collapse of capitalism. Capitalism was never really something that was functioning in the first place. Sorry, I just needed to
Yeah. Well, and for whom? Like,
yeah,
I mean, just all this, like, rebuilding the economy. What are we rebuilding?
wealth. We're rebuilding wealth
Yeah.
from people who had in the first
So
place.
part of me is like, I want things to go up. It's really hard. Like I have this internal conversation of, I want people to see this as a chance for serious reformation or transformation, but without hurting the people who are already hurt. Yeah. Those are the
I think
thoughts.
this is
Girl, you're gonna have to take that up with Jeff Bezos.
Ugh.
Y'all gonna have to talk. Y'all gonna have to have a conversation with Bill Gates, with Warren Buffett. Y'all gonna have to have a conversation with those motherfuckers.
And how do those people exist?
Breaking-
Like how do you? That's a whole nother topic. But
Breaking news: Jeff Bezos decided not to end world hunger today.
and every day.
Breaking news.
that's like my favorite Twitter account.
Yep. Post that every single day.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like
sell it on Amazon.
like we talk about this like so much that sometimes it feels sort of hopeless, but this is like, and what I've kind of mentioned too is like there's this idea of like culture war, battle of the narratives, and I'm always like, are we in an actual war or are we not in an actual war? Because it seems like we're in an actual war only because it seems like they're willing to sacrifice and use children as for their battle of the narrative. Like,
Snaps.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, that's just kind of what it seems like. That's what, and I try not to go there because I'm trying to be a very facts-oriented person or whatever. But, like, if you're, I mean, to me, they've already crossed the line.
Yeah.
Way before. Way,
They never
like,
haven't.
years been back. Yeah. When
They're
I
just
actually
pushing.
been-
They're pushing the line. They're just pushing it farther and
They're
farther.
pushing the line.
Yeah.
I've actually been listening to the audiobook recently of the shock doctrine, and you know what you see what capitalism and particularly like America is willing to do to push their line overseas. They haven't. I mean, they've definitely done it here, but they've used other means to sort of keep the line. And now that line is being broken, particularly because of COVID, they're sort of digging their toes in because this was their plan all along, is they don't care about the rest of us.
You know
so
what?
they're willing to make these ethical leaps into pushing the line, but really they never cared to begin with.
That is an extraordinarily salient point to think about how United States specifically, let's just say Western capitalism or Western capital or Western economies have treated other countries. That is so smart because now we're seeing those same tactics on our own soil.
Yeah.
And now people are surprised. They're like, oh wait. And we're like, no. This has literally happened like everywhere. Like the globe is riddled with examples of how Western economies have raped other places, but now we're seeing it happen on our own soil, and now people are starting to be like, maybe this doesn't feel good.
Right. Or like kids have been in cages. Like every day we wake up, kids are in cages in the United States and other places too. But like this idea of even with Portland, the deployment of was it the Department of Homeland Security?
Yeah, federal troops.
And U.S. Marshals.
Yeah.
US Marshals.
When people were like, oh, this is a testing ground. But ICE has been around. Like, this is not new. It is new for white Portlandians. And it's terrible. It's unjust. Yeah. But it was already around. And like you said, it's been, like, none of this is new. And I'm glad people I'm not, to use the woke metaphor, like I'm becoming hopefully more woke as I live. But I'm glad people are waking up. But damn.
There are people that I've read who have studied the ways in which specifically education has been utilized or not utilized in other places to ensure complicit behavior on the part of those citizens for the people in power. We are seeing that in American educational institutions at this point. Like it is the same when we talk about testing grounds for certain things. Like when you look at Africa, when you look in Southeast Asia, when you look in India, when you look to some degree educational structures in China, what you're seeing is again, Western economic systems influencing the way that education happens in those places to ensure that future generations toe that line also, that they are brought up and educated in these systems that will keep certain people in power. That is not new either. Right. So even as we talk today about education, to think about the ways in which this has happened around the world, and now to see it happening on our own soil is surprising to some, but obviously not surprising to Luci, who knows a little bit about this shit. So get it, girl. Get it.
But just to also play my own devil's advocate, I am the same kind of person, specifically, especially in the past, who would just read an article like 10 minutes ago and then make fun of you for not knowing the stuff that I just read.
Or like I'll recommend it to someone and I haven't even read it.
You know what? No, I'm not going to let either one of you belittle your own intellects. Luci comes with shit all the time, and I'm like, damn, I have not thought about that, and I am always impressed.
And I don't care if you read it 10 minutes ago. Like, go for it.
No, do not belittle your intellect. I am here not because...
I'm sorry, it's so ingrained. I've learned it from such a young age.
I don't like it. Stop it. Don't do it anymore.
But that's the thing, too, is you're showing us learning. I am a white woman
telling someone who is not that to be quiet. So, sorry about that. I wanted to check my privilege for a hot second. It wasn't, even though my heart was in the right place.
I Karen for the good. You did Karen
it was for the good.
It was a good and necessary Karen.
But I agree, because Luci, and it's like, I think this whole idea of people being born perfect Marxists, like, that doesn't exist. And this idea that people have to be experts in something like inherently. I think if you read an article and you learn something and then like 10 minutes later you're teaching people about it, like that's what we should be doing, in my opinion. I think I feel like a fraud so much. Like, I don't know shit, but like I'm talking about it. So maybe like, I think that whole idea of knowing something versus pretending is a binary that needs to be broken. Like,
I wonder if this is an age thing, honestly, as I look around the digital room. Well, no, I'm just like, I feel like when people like, you honestly swear, like you reach a certain age, especially when you're educated and involved in academia, when you no longer give a shit about what those other people think. I mean, some of y'all have seen this in live in action from my whole, I'm like, no, fuck that. I disagree with you, because I have to own what I know, and I'm okay with that. But more people should, I do really believe that in education, more people should have voices like that. And that's why I got upset at you both. I'm like, no, own what you know. Like, it's beautiful that you have knowledge and you're willing to share it. And don't belittle that knowledge. Like, I was teasing you about Margaret Thatcher, but I mean, I love that you dropped it, because it's like, yes, like more people should know about the historical roots of these places where we are. Like, I firmly believe that. But if you're not here to tell us about it, or to just like drop Margaret Thatcher like nothing, which no one ever does, and I think is beautiful. Like, I mean, like that's rad, right?
That was a combo move.
Oh, thank y'all. That's like the one Margaret Thatcher quote I can say. FYI,
reference.
Yeah, that's just what I got.
But all of you are like that, and so I hope more often, like giving voice through this podcast, giving voice, through your educational pursuits, giving voice through other people with whom you interact, that you're able to like stand in your knowledge, and just like really say, no, I know this, and I'm gonna speak about it. I could be wrong tomorrow. That's okay. I'm the kind of human who's gonna come back and be like, oh, I made a mistake.
Right.
It was from a different article.
Miscited. Wasn't about.
Exactly.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because that's something, I mean, and again, this idea of a division between education and the real world, or theory and practice. Like, I think sometimes, like, I mean, there are a lot of people in academia who are not humble and who are in the ivory tower. And I'm so afraid of being that. I think I'm often like, I do not want to take away from stories. I do not want to devalue knowledge that comes from other sources. But I also, like, I do think sometimes I then deprecate my quote unquote academic knowledge. And I don't think either of those things are helpful. So I appreciate the acknowledgement that also academia, like Margaret Thatcher is a worthwhile, what's the word? Reference.
Dominatrix.
Dominatrix. That's what I was looking for.
High reviews on Yelp.
You know what sucks is that I do think that, returning to not DeVos's idea of schooling, because I don't think she has any ideas. I'm not sure she's not an automaton. Anyway, so this idea, though, that, you have these small groups of humans from whom you learn, I think that that's cool, and we do that here. I think that we learn from one another, and so we're like, but we also live in this privileged bubble where we have the ability to sound smarter than we are thanks to our shadow producer, and to have a platform thanks to Lazarus, and to rethink things thanks to Luci, and to have new stories thanks to Kane Koanoa, and to have different perspectives thanks to you, Lichen. And so I think that we have these bubbles, and we know the beauty of what that can look like. How do we institute that? Like, how do we, like you were talking about the end of capitalism, how do we end education the way that it is formatted now? Right. I worry that more power will be consolidated into those standardized companies because of the ways in which education is looked at this moment. Like they'll say, oh no, we have this curriculum for that. Right. Like they haven't been planning for this bullshit for years. That's what worries me, that, the beauty of this educational stuff is going to be lost in further sort of privatization, and as opposed to democratizing education, it's going to be privatized.
Yes, and decolonizing it. And I think social justice often becomes, how many more people can we allow into behaving like their oppressors, in a very grossly symptomatic way, but I think this neoliberalization of social justice in education terrifies me. So,
and that's a statement that should never be made. Like the neoliberalism.
It's
of
so antithetical.
Justice. That's
using the word, I guess I should say. Not true social justice.
I think that
Although maybe what we're doing now, this is somehow the light in the darkness of time itself. The future will be these online sort of things, like how it is now, but it will be in a way that will be less awkward somehow. Like there will be something that comes through. Maybe, I don't know. I'm fantasizing a bit, but just like some sort of type of cyberpunky thing, but in a good way. People are still able to, and even more so, have the diversity of learning, like you were saying, Hunty. Maybe. I don't know. That's just a hope that I'm throwing out, I guess.
We gotta keep it awkward, though.
Awkward
that's
is
my
good.
opinion. It has to stay awkward.
Guys.
Don't lose the awkward.
Keeping it awkward since 2020. It's another shirt.
Talk about Lichen quotes, yeah.
We got merch,
gotta keep
y'all.
it awkward.
We got merch.
Writing that down. Okay, I think we
keeping it awkward since 2020.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something, Kane Koanoa? I thought I saw you.
Well, the only thing I want to jump onto what Hunty's saying, and in regards to don't silence your voices, don't silence yourselves. I think when we do feel that urge to pull back, it's really the system that we've been living in that is telling us, especially since we're underrepresented in education and in the ideas of the world, that we think that we don't have the answers because of who we are, whether it be based on our gender, our race, or whatever it is that the system tells is wrong or is less than. So that when we do feel that urge to pull back, that should be the moment when we tell ourselves to move forward and to not shut ourselves up. And just remember, Trump opens his mouth every day, and he is one of the most least qualified people to do so. So we still remind ourselves that,
you can do it. You can do it.
You can do it too. He can open his trap.
I have a poster of Trump just for that reason. To remind myself that I can do it too.
But just don't allow the system, because the system is trying to tell you, the story the system tells us is that our voice doesn't count, or that we need to be even extra smart to speak, that we need to be even extra successful. And that's not true. We don't have to be. Just look at the president.
His only possible glimmer of inspiration.
We have experiences that make us who we are. So fuck everybody that tells us that that's wrong.
Yeah.
Open your mouth and speak it. That's all I want to jump on.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good place to end this episode.
Yeah.
Actually.
This has become so I feel like our episodes often do, where it's this fucked up shit, and then it's cathartic because you're all so wonderful.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the ball boys.
Nobody makes my feelings.
I feel like listeners still don't know what we mean by ball boy, but that's okay. They can Google
That's
it.
all right.
Hey,
never
if they
never
want to know,
will.
they can reach out to us on Twitter
Yeah.
at Public Space Pod.
Hey, what'd
There
you
you
mean
go.
by your weird ass references? Ball boys.
Hey.
If it's neoliberal, I have them pay a fee for that extra information.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for the premium members.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can reach out on Twitter and then donate via
yeah. Patreon.
Patreon. Thank you.
If you top tier, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't say this, but like as a joke, I guess top tier Patreon donors will get a free class session with Lichen on Margaret Thatcher.
And you can hear the one thing I know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, can we do that? Can we I almost said pimp ourselves out. That's not what I meant. Though
We're
my
talking
body, my
about-
rules. But
We're
no,
trying
I
to end
mean,
on a good note.
I just saying, like, yeah, we could do that. We could have like private instructionals, like
Public space pods.
Ooh.
Like
Like
literally.
with Betsy DeVos,
Oh my
your exact
God.
model. I'll teach people
my
in a
God.
close, intimate Zoom lesson about Margaret Thatcher.
Insert George Michael.
wow.
You said close and intimate, so.
Wow, what an entrepreneurial vision.
It's all right. We have Mark, so he can take all this part out. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks, everybody.
Kane Koanoa, for joining
Yeah.
us.
Yes,
And,
thank you. I hope you
and,
can continue to join us.
Yeah,
was
and sharing your stories.
and especially that last bit of wisdom. Thank you to everyone over here in Public Space, Lazarus, Hunty, Lichen, Marks, and myself, Luci. Again, you can find us at Public Space Pod on Twitter and do your own sleuthing to find us individually. Ask us questions on there about ball boys or whatever you feel like asking questions about. That's going to do it for us for this week. Again, next week we're going to be recording for RPG, the Apocalypse World. We're finally going to get that going, so look out for that. And hope you have a good week. We'll see you later.
Space travel and so on and so on.
Hi everyone, this is Lazarus Wolf. Just wanted to do a shout out to our patrons. Absolutely a genuine, massive thank you to our supporters who help us continue this podcast. So thank you, David, Noelia, and the Midnight Sloth for supporting us at the $5 solidarity level.
I like you, and if you can't handle it, you can just, fuck off.
Please consider donating to your local bail or mutual aid fund or another charity for social justice. If also able, you can also support us at patreon.com/publicspacetravel.